and welcome to Macros with Mythili, the ET Now show that takes a hard look at all the major macroeconomic issues and developments in India and overseas. In this issue, we're going to take a look at a recent announcement of the Union government that could have wide ramifications for a federal republic like ours, but hasn't received much attention so far: the appointment of the 15th Finance Commission. What does this mean for federalism, cooperative or competitive? And as this is a large and complex issue, let me plunge into discussion right away with my stellar panel. Dr. Govt Rao, member of the 14th Finance Commission and former director NIPFP, the Delhi-based fiscal think tank; Dr. Haseeb Drabu, Finance Minister, Jammu and Kashmir; and Shoaib Gupta, member secretary, Asian Development Research Institute, Patna. Welcome to the show, Govt, Haseeb and Shoaib. For all the imperfections of our democracy, one of our strengths really has been that we've been able to create and nurture institutions such as the Election Commission, the CAG, and the subject of our discussion today, the Finance Commission. Though Finance Commission members are appointed by the government, the Union government, they have generally been independent, and in all fairness, their recommendations too have been accepted without demur by successive Union governments. Having said that, there are always subtle and not so subtle pressures on the Commission. For instance, only recently Finance Minister Arun Jaitley, speaking of the higher devolution under the 14th Finance Commission, pointedly remarked that India is a union of states, so both the states as also the Union must have sufficient resources. Given that background, let me ask you, Govt, whether the 15th Finance Commission may feel obliged to be less generous to the states. Will we see a reversal of the past trend of steady increase in the state share? Govt?
Thank you, Mythili. There is a presumption that the 14th Finance Commission has been substantially enhanced the devolution to the states. Now, and therefore, one of the terms of reference basically says that you should, the 15th Commission should analyze the impact of the fiscal on the fiscal situation of the Union arising from the substantially enhanced devolution to the states, and following the recommendations of the 14th Finance Commission. And then it also says that it should take into account the imperative, please mark the word imperative, of the National Development Program. Basically saying that under National Development Program we have a number of centrally sponsored schemes, and therefore, and then 14th Finance Commission has given overly generous recommendation, and therefore nudging the 15th Finance Commission at least to hold rather than, or even to reduce the tax devolution. It's basically nudging. This type of directives are not really in the interest of a federal setup. That's one thing. The second important thing there, it says that the 14th Finance Commission has not been overly generous, and it has to be known, because 14th Finance Commission had to take into account the planned revenue expenditure needs in addition to the non-plan, unlike in the past. And then the 14th Finance Commission did not give any discretionary grants, including the environmental grants, and therefore saving on the first account was something like 5.5% of the divisible pool, and on the second it is 1.5% of the divisible pool. The comparison has to be between 39% and 42%. On top of it, to say that I am going to give grants under Article 285, which itself is a questionable proposition, for various centrally sponsored schemes, you should take that into account. I think that's, I hope the Finance Commission will see this term of reference in a proper perspective.
Absolutely, Govt. I agree with you 100%, and I'm sure as do Haseeb and Shoaib. But Haseeb, as someone who's been part of the GST Council, how profoundly have the rules been reset after GST? The GST Council is perhaps India's first genuinely federal institution, since the centre and the state sit together as equals, perhaps for the first time in history. Not only has this completely changed India's federal polity, of course, besides unifying the country economically, the inherent design of the GST favours more balanced regional growth, since GST favours consumption states. How do you think this will impact the Finance Commission's recommendations, since bridging the horizontal imbalances, that is the interstate differences, is a big part of the Commission's mandate, Haseeb?
Look, I think, let me start with, apart from agreeing with what Govt just said, I think I was very disappointed to read the terms of reference of the 15th Finance Commission. it shows no recognition of the fact that the institutional fiscal landscape of India has changed completely between the 14th and the 15th commissions. Now, one of your big irritants in the federal fiscal scheme, the planning commission, has disappeared. Niti Aayog doesn't have the same mandate that the planning commission had. The plan non-plan distinctions are over, and you have a new, which you said correctly, which I believe is India's first genuinely functional federal institution. Finance Commission, as S. Guhan very famously said, is a dog that barks at the center and bites the states. So there were question marks on the whole federal character of the Finance Commission. Now, if such massive changes have happened in the institutional setup, then the terms of reference should have been vastly different. You have created a new statutory body, the GST Council. It has implications right down the line, because now GST Council itself is doing compensatory grants to states at least for a period of 5 years. Starting from there down to how, what happens in the taxes that are now, one tax. So I think somewhere apart from the typical constitutional responsibility, which is the first 2 terms of reference, I believe there are at least, I've seen, I think 11 or 12 terms of reference, none of them show any recognition of this. And as Govind rightly pointed out, there was not a massive hike in devolutions. What has happened post 14th Commission is that whatever your expenditure underwriting was happening from center has been reduced and has moved to a higher revenue sharing. So I think directionally, we were looking at revenue sharing being the core of federalism and not expenditure underwriting, which had distorted the federal system. Because if you go back to the Govt pool and how money was taken out of there, put into a pool outside with ministries giving CS and all that. So I think that basic change in the design has not been captured by this Finance Commission. And I think we have lost a big opportunity in trying to strengthen the federal system, because this government did fundamentally, by accepting the 14th Commission recommendations, move in the form of fiscal, in federalism, because this the BJP government is not really a federal kind of government. They didn't believe in kind of federal politics. But this is the first time actually huge steps have been taken towards federalization of the economy in Mr. Jaitley's budget.
Yes, I'm sure again, Shaibal, Govind and I also agree with you on that, Haseeb, because I think this is going to be a debate in which all three of us are in agreement on everything. So let me shift to another point which I want to raise with Shaibal, since he comes from Bihar. Shaibal, Bihar and Odisha have been clamoring for a special category status. This is a status accorded by the National Development Council and currently available to 11 states. For the benefit of our viewers, can you very briefly explain what are the advantages that special category status really confers on states, and why should a state like Bihar, that prima facie doesn't suffer from any of the disadvantages of difficult terrain, low population density or sizable share of tribal population, etc., why should they want special status? Shaibal?
I can say about Bihar, that Bihar is one of the not only landlocked state, but historically Bihar was disadvantaged because of freight equalization policy. Possibly you know that immediately after independence, T.T. Krishnamachari introduced freight equalization on coal, cement and steel. Now in the process, Bihar has subsidized the Indian development, national industrial development at the cost of the state. Now before freight equalization was introduced in early 50s, there was a regular investment in Bihar, in United Bihar. For example, Tata's came way back in 1911 and various other industries came. Now in the post-independence period, when freight equalization was introduced, Bihar was subjected to that disadvantage. Now the essentially the special category status was sought for two reasons. One, that the proportion of central devolution will increase, and secondly, the for private investment, Bihar will get certain benefits. I am not very sure about Odisha, because Odisha has a sea front, it is not a landlocked state. So, the criticality of special category state which is there for Bihar is possibly absent in the case of Odisha, but Odisha is also one of the most underdeveloped state, and historically this was disadvantage.
You're right in some part, Shoaibul, but actually, as I said, you're right in some areas, Shoaibul, but I find myself a little bit in disagreement with you, because many would argue that the ills of Bihar are partly self-inflicted because of poor administration, etc. But that's for another debate, because Govind, the received wisdom really has it that the Commission's transfers are really meant to enable all states to provide comparable levels of services at comparable tax rates, while ensuring budget balance in the revenue account. But what does this really mean very briefly? And yes, it is true that with GST, tax rates are more or less the same across the states. But the fact is that states levy taxes on items that are outside the GST net, that is alcohol, petroleum, electricity, and they also charge user fee. So how does one ensure that you don't have the free rider problem with some states opting not to burden their residents and instead depending on transfers to the common kitty? Govind.
See, the onus of this lies with again the Finance Commission. While making the assessment, the Finance Commission should take into account the taxable capacity and not the actual taxes collected. Similarly, expenditure needs have to be taken and not the actual expenditures incurred in the base year when you are making projections. Now, if you did that, there is no question of free rider business. And most of the Finance Commission have been doing this. In fact, the 14th Finance Commission, for example, took all state average tax GSTP ratio as the base, and in those states which did not come up to that level were in fact phased out to reach at the terminal year. That is the way the projections were done. Now, that apart, that's one part of it. Generally speaking, the finance commissions have not taken any cognizance of the special category status. At least the 14th Finance Commission has said that every state is special, and therefore every state's requirement is something which we will have to look into. That is the way that it has gone about. And that, it was the creation of the Planning Commission, and then of course, as of now, the Gargilla formula grants, since the loan part has taken away, there is no question of 90-10, because earlier it used to be 90% grants and 10% loans. Now there is no loan. But in centrally sponsored schemes, it continues to be there. I think the solution to that will have to be that in the centrally sponsored schemes, you don't really have to have a uniform matching ratio. You can design a matching ratio depending upon the extent of lag in the particular service. For example, if it is elementary education, what is the extent of lag, to what extent the particular state lags. And the advanced states need not have to pay the same matching ratio as the states which are lagging. This issue it's a question of designing the transfer system, and for that reason that can be done even without having to going through the whole instrumentality of the special category status.
Hasib, did you agree with Shoaibul on the special category status, especially since J&K is a special category state? And I remember that you said J&K should not be treated as a special category, but as a special status. Now, what exactly is the fine distinction? And do you think the Finance Commission should take cognizance of this? Hasib?
No, of course not. And there is a basic fundamental difference between special category status and special category states. J&K, Assam, some parts of Assam and Nagaland are the only special category states which have a constitutional position under Article 370, 371A and 371B and C. None of the others, that Govind said, this is done by the Planning Commission. And Planning Commission itself was set up by an executive order. It had no constitutional position. So let's not try and get the ghost of the special category states back into play, because originally there were only three, as I said. And then when union territories became states, they were treated as special category. And when Northeast split into 7, they became special category. Otherwise, there is no justification. Everybody can call itself a special category state. J&K is very unique, and we have a constitutional position which neither Bihar nor UP nor Goa and others have. So let's not, I think, get into that kind of a distinction. And Finance Commission has never recognized these as these were a Planning Commission distinction. And with the whole plan assistance having gone, it really makes no sense to bring it back. One can, outside the system, design some packages for them, a PM package or whatever, but to now get into special cases, I think it has lost meaning in terms of this. But I would also like to point out that, you know, interesting things will now will happen and about to happen. We looked at the criteria which Govind was talking about of tax capacities or tax potential. This will be one of the criteria. And Govind is a great believer in normative things. I'm not a great believer in normative things, but fact is that yes, tax capacity has to be assessed. Pre-GST, this was a production-based system. Post-GST, it's a consumption tax. Now, the way the pecking order will change will be very, very interesting to see, because now the tax potential of J&K will be much higher than what it was earlier, and the tax potential of Maharashtra will probably be lower than what it was earlier. I don't know exactly how the numbers will kind of pan out and how they will kind of, you know, reconcile these. Also, as I said, GST Council has taken some views and some commitments have been made. How does Finance Commission reconcile with those? What will Finance Commission say about these, and what happens in the conflict? More importantly, for better coordination, earlier, because Planning Commission was a player in the game, one member was an ex officio person in the Finance Commission. That has been continued. I would have much rather thought that somebody from the GSTN Council should have been co-opted in the Finance Commission, so that there is some understanding of what the GST Council is discussing.
Oh yes, indeed. I think we're in for interesting times on the federal fiscal front. But Govind, a notable change in the terms of reference of the 15th Finance Commission is that their mandate says that you use a 2011 census rather than the 1971 census. And though there's certainly a case for using a more recent census rather than one that was so old which doesn't reflect the position on the ground, the fact is that the central and the eastern states have witnessed a much faster population growth than the southern and the western states in the intervening period. So will this not skew the horizontal distribution even more in favor of the poorer states and possibly give rise to some resentment in the richer states? We already saw how the present Prime Minister, when he was Chief Minister of Gujarat, had argued that Gujarat doesn't want any taxes from the rest of the country, but nor does it want to share its taxes. Will that kind of a situation, that kind of a slightly confrontational kind of situation arise even more now that you have this, again, a new term of reference, apart from the problems with the other terms of reference? Govind?
Mythili, the two issues are different. Services have to be provided to the people. You cannot really say that 1971 population is the population for which you provide service. So 2011 population is an appropriate thing to do, appropriate population number to take. Now, the reason why they took 1971 population was that there was a parliamentary resolution that for all transfer of resources, you need to take, wherever you take population, it should be 1971 population. Now the basic issue is, I mean, this came from the pressure from some of the advanced states saying that, look, I mean, these laggards, they don't really follow the population policy, and then, we don't want to, basically using the transfer system to incentivize population control. I mean, which is not anyway appropriate. Now, as far as sharing of the taxes are concerned, as I mentioned, the taxes of the union are the taxes of the union, and they do not belong to the center. To say that it is corporation tax that originates from my place, I will take it. I don't want the tax devolution. Is basically, I mean, anybody, Bombay, for example, has all the headquarters of the companies. All the taxes are paid from there. That doesn't mean that is, Bombay has, created that economic activity and the taxes have been generated there. And, this was, the corporation tax was assigned to this thing for reasons of comparative advantage, and therefore to claim that it is my tax and I am sharing it with others is completely, completely wrong. It cannot be done in a federal setup.
Hasib, Govind has already given you one job to add to your many jobs, but the 15th Finance Commission, as per the terms of reference, has also been tasked with examining whether revenue deficit grants should be given at all, even though the Constitution does have a specific provision for making such grants, and J&K, I assume, has been a beneficiary of this in the past. So is there really a case for discontinuing it, Hasib?
Not at the moment. I mean, this is where we will have to see how things pan out. That's what I was talking about when I said J&K will be better now. But that doesn't mean that you will phase out or stop revenue grants. These are statutory grants, the only statutory grants that are there. So one will have to see, maybe some other states will need these revenue resource grants. J&K, being a heavy consumption state, may actually do very well in revenue collection, and if we manage to do well on our expenditure side, we may not need it. But you will need, there's no way in which you can actually achieve a balance that you would be able to do away with the revenue resource grants. It's also interesting, like, Govt keeps talking about corporation tax and others. Interesting problems will arise. Now, for instance, as on today, Centre has unutilized IGST of more than 1 lakh crores. Whose money is it? Should the Finance Commission take a call on it? That in its recommendation, that if there's IGST which is unutilized, then should it be shared in the devolution formula of the Finance Commission? Should there be some other formula? Now there should be. I mean, we'll certainly comment about the terms of reference to the Government of India and talk about it as Govt suggested. But they must have some leeway to be able to deal with the situations that will emerge now. You are getting into what I would think is a new federal system, and we must move away from revenues. I think this is a time to move into resource sharing. If you see how natural resources are shared in this country, 90% of it goes to the union through the PSUs, CPSUs. Is it time to bring them into the whole kitty of divisible pool? That now, otherwise you're getting into protectionist modes. Look what Orissa is doing, look what Goa is doing on iron ore, on coal. So natural resources have to be now brought into the thing, the whole question of royalty. Who revises it? What do all these IOCs of the world do? Do they share dividends? They share with the central government. Based on what? Based on natural resources of states. So I think we need to also look at that as the second generation Finance Commission, where not just tax revenues are shared, but resources, in particular revenues arising out of natural resources, should be shared with the states in some form. I think that would be a Finance Commission that needs to get into, the 15th Commission must get into, and that will help the states.
Okay. Shoaib, Haseeb is suggesting a second generation Finance Commission, and it is true that we do need to rethink the entire institution of the Finance Commissions. But over the years, the union government spending on items in the states and the concurrent list has been increasing really, much to the distress of state governments that look upon this, and rightly so, as interfering in their space. So the fact that the union has now got less money to indulge in such activities should be good news for the states. Do you agree with that, Shoaib? Very briefly.
No, no, I don't agree. But one or two things I would like to mention, which I couldn't discuss. One is that one should go back into the basics of Finance Commission, that essentially they are supposed to do the equalization grant. Now, from that respect, many of the underdeveloped states got disadvantage. When we talk about this special category status, primarily because that over the years, for example, a state like Bihar was disadvantaged because of lack of investment in the social sector. Now, how to meet this gap? Earlier Planning Commission could think about. Now we have only one source, that is the Finance Commission. Now, one of the most important thing of the 15th Finance Commission is that this is being, this commission is essentially going to has been set up in the backdrop when the Planning Commission is not there, and GST has been implemented. So in the future also, how much revenue collections will take place, one cannot be that sure. So it is a very difficult situation which we anticipate that it will not be very easy done. So in this backdrop, the disadvantaged states, especially Bihar, has to face this music.
Okay, okay. So we certainly are heading for difficult times, but I think we in India got used to living through difficult times, and we usually come out of it reasonably well. But I'm afraid we've run out of time completely, so I'll have to end this discussion now. Thank you very much, Govind, Haseeb and Shoaib, for joining me in the discussion and sharing your views on the challenges before the 15th Finance Commission, which clearly has its task cut out for it. It's difficult to find common ground in a country as diverse as us, but the GST example shows it is not impossible, and with a seasoned bureaucrat turned politician N.K. Singh as chairman, we have reason to hope that the Commission's recommendations will be just as path-breaking as that of its predecessors. Thank you also for watching. Remember, we'll be back next week with yet another edition of Macros with Mythili. Till then, it's thank you and goodbye from all of us at ET Now. Remember, if there's any issue that you'd like to see discussed in this forum, please do write in to us at the email ID you see at the bottom of your screen.